Good evening, everyone, and welcome to MANstream Media, where we look at the issues from a male-friendly perspective. With us tonight, as always, is Dr. Warren Farrell, who's the author of The Myth of Male Power. And by the way, you might want to know that The Myth of Male Power is now available in ebook. Warren, welcome.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. This is something I'm now looking forward to every month.
We're looking forward to it, too. And the other person we have is Paul Elam, the founder of A Voice for Men and also the instigator for the conference that's going to be happening in June. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And maybe we'll hear a little bit more about the conference later on. Tonight we're going to talk about failure to launch. And I think before we even start on that, let's look at something historically. You know, the failure to launch is unique to our present day. And if you look back prior to the Industrial Revolution, what you find is that there was no such thing as launching. You know, young men were sent to apprentice with someone. They went to an uncle or the guy they knew downtown, or they went to the father's farm. And so they didn't launch out. They sort of changed roles, but they stayed close by. So this idea of launching is fairly new. And if you look back even farther to the indigenous tribes and look at what they did when young men would change into men, what would they do? They would separate the boys from the women. And usually in the rituals they had, the initiation rituals, the boys and women would be separated, and the boys would be off with the men for a good period of time. Now, the reason I say that is because what we're doing now is the exact opposite. You know, instead of separating the boys out and putting them with the men, we've separated the boys out and putting them with all women in schools. We're separating the boys out in homes now and putting them with mothers again. So they're not getting this contact with their fathers. And I think that's one piece of the whole complicated issue of the failure to launch that we're going to be talking about tonight, and all the things we can talk about. Where should we start, gentlemen? Who wants to start off?
I think maybe, Paul, if you have ideas, great. And but one way to start, I think there's a lot of people not aware of the amount of evidence that there is about the fact that boys are in failure to launch mode. You know, the evidence is in the education area, it's in the IQ area. Boys' IQ is dropping. It's in the mental health area. It's in the physical health area. It's in the economic health area. And what almost nobody understands is that it's worldwide in industrialized countries. And there's a reason that it's worldwide in industrialized countries and all of that. So maybe just getting the evidence on board that there is this failure to launch mode happening. It's happening worldwide and in the different economic and mental health areas that it is in. So, for example, you were saying a moment ago, this is the first time that we've sort of experienced this, and one of the pieces of very specific evidence about this is that this is the first time in American history that our sons will have less education than their dads. Mm. And when a boy has less education than his dad, it's oftentimes a huge impact on the economy. There are very few women who want to marry men who are reading Why Men Are the Way They Are in the unemployment line. If you're, no matter how supposedly schooled you are in relationships and love, if you're in the unemployment line, you're not eligible. Men will marry women in unemployment lines, and almost it brings out their savior, feeling like I can save her, I have a need, I'm needed. But a woman doesn't have an interest in that. And when women have children, one of the reasons that 53% of women in 2010 who had children without being married is because so many of the men are not earning enough, and the woman doesn't feel like she wants to have a child and then have another child, because many women perceive that a man who doesn't produce economically, they don't see his potential usefulness as a dad. They see only his failure to launch as an economic being. And so, and we see this worldwide, Italy, Spain, almost all the industrialized countries. And the thing that the industrialized countries have in common is that in all industrialized countries, there's enough income for people to be able to not have to get married and stay married for a lifetime. So they have the option to divorce. And with the option to divorce comes the tendency for mother involvement to increase and father involvement to either decrease or disappear. One of the reasons it disappears is because oftentimes the mother feels that the father isn't fathering in the way that she feels. is the right method of fathering. And the father feels so gate-kept, he feels more like a babysitter. And then some new woman comes along and says, oh, you're single and I have 2 children. And he feels an opportunity to feel loved and appreciated by the new woman and the children. And he begins to let his his previous children go. And so that only creates more of a problem. The boy growing up, who's his biological son, looks at the world and says, gee, my dad, what could I be as a man? Well, I don't like what my father is doing. I don't like marriage because my dad has been tossed out of the home. I don't like having children because what do? I end up paying money for them, but I don't see them like my dad is. And so there's this real sense of what, in a way, this failure to launch is almost an unconscious wisdom on the part of boys looking at fathers and saying, do I want a life like that?
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I put in the low bar was a link to an article in Psychology Today, and I think another angle of this that really bears out examination is the tendency in our culture to pathologize this problem with young men as some sort, and the article that I linked to was by an MD who indicated that he felt like this was a product of irresponsible personalities in young men, and that it needed to be treated as a psychopathology and that they needed to get therapy and be identified as a problem. This is straight out of Psychology Today. My question is, who is failing who here? We have a ever lessening presence of young men in college, and as Warren just pointed out, men's economic viability is also their viability as men in this culture. When they are removed from that, when they're removed from earning power, which is that's exactly what's happening right now in our culture. When this happens, their idea of their worth and what they're working toward is diminished. So what we have now, I think, is a generation of young men that are looking at what Warren was just talking about. Look at what happened to my dad. I see a college that is 65% female, yet all the programs, all the special services there, everything is tailored to get more and more women in, and there's nothing available for men. That translates to really a hostile environment, and it's not surprising to me that young men are dropping out of that. We're also seeing them disappear from the workforce. But is this a failure of mentally disturbed young men, or are they seeing the reality of the culture as it is, and there's no incentive in their minds for really getting ahead? Because if you can't get through the education system, if you can't get ahead economically, then you can't start a family, you're not going to attract women. What's the incentive? And I think that's what we need to look at more so than just another way to brand young men as useless and as some sort of social reject, which is what they're getting. They're getting called losers. And I think essentially we are failing them, not the other way around.
Yes, and I think one of the ways we've failed over the years is for about 40 years we've had pep rallies for girls. Every aspect of being a girl has a pep rally. Oh, go girl, you're good at this. Girls can do anything, blah, 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 blah. We've completely ignored the boys. Not only that, but we blame them for this, that, and the other. There was a famous psychiatrist, I think it's from Germany, and he said one time that if there are no angels, devils will fall into place. And in other words, if you don't bless the youngster, if you don't have pep rallies, there's going to be problems that come. And I can't blame these young men. I mean, they've been in schools where being male is being the problem. They've been in schools where being female is the solution. And over and over and over again, they see this movement towards glamorizing women and everything about them, and organizations and women together doing this. Guys, I looked in the newspaper today. There was 3 articles on the same page about women. One woman does this, a woman's view of this, and 3. And I thought, why is there not an article that says a man's view of this, and 2 men get together to do that? Because the media and educational system don't focus on men in a positive way. They focus on them as being the perpetrators, you know. And that's what we're dealing with. So, you know, we need more men are good stuff.
We really have a perfect storm happening. We have sort of what I would call the self-fulfilling era of girls rule, boys drool. And especially when you get into junior high school and when the girls realize their sexual power and their beauty power, yep. And they're also you know, they're doing better in school, and they're doing better in almost all, not only academic subjects, but they're much more likely to be in the honor society, much more likely to be elected to office. So all these things are sort of, you know, reinforcing the girls' rule. But it's sort of, you also have, the T-shirts and postcards saying things like, boys are stupid, throw rocks at them. And you can imagine if we ever had something saying Jews are greedy, throw rocks at them, or girls are stupid, throw rocks at them, or blacks are stupid, throw rocks at them. You know, there would be, no school would allow a T-shirt like that to be worn, right. And yet schools are allowing T-shirts like that, mocking boys, to be worn. And when you combine this with, you know, almost every TV series that you watch, whether it's Breaking Bad or Mad Men, you know, the men are evil, and they're you know, or they're psychopaths, or just their everyday life is their life of, you know, they're drinkers, they're smokers, they're demeanors of women, and so on. And there's the belief that men are earning more than women for the same work just suggests a whole world that is designed by men to benefit men at the expense of women. And all these things leave the average boy thinking that, well, you're the rapist, you're the criminal, you're more likely to be in prison, you're stupider, you know, and you know, and on, and it doesn't leave a nurturing environment. And I'm so glad to have been part of the women's movement, you know, sort of supporting women at the beginning to really get, you know, to not be seen as secretaries and nurses and just, you know, and housewives, no matter how brilliant the woman was. And we've done a phenomenal job of opening options to women and supporting the wind beneath women's wings, if you will. But we really, but in the meantime, because we believed that men had it all their way, and we didn't understand that the obligation to earn money that somebody else would spend while we die sooner is not really power, but we men were calling it that power because therefore we were blaming men if they succeeded at earning money, and men who didn't succeed at earning money were invisible, disregarded, and disrespected. That combination left very few men feeling like, gee, I'm honored in this society. And men should not be honored more than women, but we should be honored differently than women for different types of achievements, for different parts of our personalities. And the overall feeling that we should be left with is one where our son can look forward to becoming a man. If the Atlantic's articles and books called The End of Men are in fact have any germ of truth, you can't expect a boy to look forward to a life journey in which the end is the end of him.
Yes.
I think the term that Warren used, perfect storm, is the perfect expression to define what's happening here. When you look at many average young men in today's culture, you have a young man that is likely as not raised in a home without a father. His father may be personally demonized and alienated from his life by a mother using a corrupt court system at her behest that helps her demonize the father. He goes into primary school in an environment where women, or rather girls, are treated as special cases coming in the door, and boys are literally sort of shuttled off to the side. Many of them are medicated. Sometimes that's legitimately ADHD. Other times it's a management tool that happens to boys. They get all this propaganda all through 12 years of school about being historical oppressors. They get demonized. And then are we surprised? Now, I had somebody react on the Facebook page, said, you know, don't be like feminists. We need to hold young men accountable. Well, of course we need to hold everybody accountable for their decisions, what they do. But, I mean, we also have to be realistic. If you grow up feeling like an outsider and feeling demonized from the time you're born to when you graduate, if you graduate high school, and many of our young men aren't, what do you think college looks like, honestly, at this point in your life, having this life experience and feeling demonized and seeing your father demonized and seeing males demonized all through this whole spectrum and arch of your young life? Or is this how we prepare young men? Tom was right. We don't have rituals for young men to enter manhood. What we do is we take boys and we thrust them into the water and say sink or swim, and then we turn our backs on them. And many times we weigh them down with rocks now when we're doing it. It is a perfect storm, and it's going to have far-reaching consequences for this society and this culture past the immediate apparent personal gains for women, which are, of course, fine. But when you look long-term at a culture where the men are not productive, you're looking at a culture in trouble.
Yes. You really are. In fact, when you look at male energy, when channeled well, produces your inventors, your creative spirits, your CEOs, people willing to work 70, 80 hours a week, travel all over the world, have practically no life, but yet they contribute like Steve Jobs, to the world. But on the other hand, when you have your male energy channeled badly, you have your serial killers, your mass murderers, your prisoners. And so the price for a society of not paying attention to boy energy is really enormous. And you have we have something happening all over the industrialized world that almost nobody puts their fingers on, and it's what I might call the purpose void. And what I mean by the purpose void is that throughout all of history, every society that survived based on its ability to train its sons to have a purpose, and that purpose was included being disposable. Purpose of being a warrior was the purpose, and of course being a warrior meant being disposable. The purpose of working on the coal mine, working on the oil rig, working on construction sites, but there was a high risk of disposability in that area as well. And so now we have fewer men that are needed in war and to be warriors in that traditional sense. And so there's a loss of warrior or disposability as purpose. That's good news. The women's movement had the same experience. Women weren't needed for their sole purpose of defining themselves as girls and women as being homemakers. So when the women lost their unique purpose of being homemakers or nurses or teachers, the women's movement came and expanded the concept of female purpose to careers. But no one has expanded the concept of male purpose to being possibly a father. And in the future, careers will not last a lifetime like they did in the past. They will change much more frequently. The only lifetime sense of purpose for a man will be being a father. And it will be the only thing he will be able to be in charge of to at least 50%, about approximately 50%. Certainly in a corporation, he's not in charge 50%. He's in charge usually 1% or 1/10 of 1% in some little bailiwick. And that corporation will usually die out or be bought out or be merged, and so and his career will often change. But his son, his daughter, that's where his heart opens up. That's where a sense of new purpose opens up. But we haven't done any work in our school systems or with our parents to if a girl is like 14 and she's dating a boy, and one boy is off to Stanford and is going to be an engineer, and the other boy is off to being just a sweet boy who is, the sweet boy will be called failure to launch if he's not going on to college, and the mother and father will help educate the daughter as to well, why don't you go out with with that boy who's going to Stanford? The car is available for the boy going to Stanford, but it isn't available for the other boy. And there's thousands of little hints as to what the girl, the advantages the girl will have going out with the boy who's going to Stanford. And so but no one says, that boy, sweetheart, you're a girl who's going to go to MIT or stand for yourself or whatever, and you'll want a career. I can see it in you. So find a guy who's loving, who's nurturing, who's caring, and so you can have children and have those children raised well. And so the girl feels like, well, wait a minute, what will all my girlfriends say? Your girlfriends will someday be really envious of you that you have a husband that cares, that takes care of the family, that you don't have a divorce, that you have something that is better life-wise than she has, and you'll be able to be supported in your career to go as high as you wish. So you can be a have-it-all woman. You can have your career, you can have your husband, you can have your children, but you have to value or include the possibility of valuing a man with a different type of personality than maybe your dad or your grandpa had.
Yes, I've said for a long time, Warren, that the world would change very quickly if women changed their what they desired about men.
Yes.
Because right now their desires are based on status. Who's highest on the status bar? And if that status bar changed to being who was the softest, easiest going, loving guy, you'd see men clamoring to be as soft and easygoing and loving as you can in order to get the hot women. I mean, it's just that simple.
And it's still not getting them selected in that way. I think that's the really tough pill for society to swallow, because it's in our instinct as men to protect women, to provide for them, to give them what they want or whatever they claim to want. It was actually it wasn't like forging the path of feminism and expanding women's roles was a horrific obstacle to overcome. There was a lot of men in the culture ready and willing to rush in and assist with that and support in it and make it happen because it was their instinct to do so. Yes. However, on the other side of this coin, we do have the human instinct for women to select men based on status and power and money and everything that we're taking away from men right now.
Exactly.
And this is a real challenge. So while feminism, and I know people are going to argue against this, and that's fine, it was a much easier path for change to women in feminism than it will ever be for men to change. One of the things I value about what we're doing here, what we do at A Voice for Men, and what is starting to happen to the cultural consciousness is that we're creating the option for young men to rethink themselves in some other mold, because the expectations on them are not likely to end anytime soon. They are going to be living in a culture where they're told that they're deficient and that they're historical oppressors, and they're also told they need to go out and be powerful and strong and make more money, and they need to be perfect, and they need to be there for everything, and they're going to be in a culture where we're raising women with the message that you can have it all. You can have everything you want. There's nothing in your way. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can have both sides of the coin any way you want it. This is another recipe for disaster, and men are starting to check out of that. And I think it will really take a lot of men checking out of that before society starts to wake up to the double standards and to the problems, and we begin to address it on a cultural level. I don't think anything else will get society's attention other than men saying, I'm done.
Well, I think one thing that will... Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to agree with Paul and say that, you know, the failure to launch thing may very well be a wonderful opportunity now for our culture to open their eyes and say, wait, what are we doing? I hope that's what happens, but
I think
I'm not real optimistic about it.
I think failure to launch alone will just push the attitude toward men into being more and more negative. I think one of the reasons I'm feeling so supportive of the Voice for Men conference is because we really need to get together. We really need to organize. We really need to sue universities, for example, that just have women's studies courses and yet get federal money to have something that is in clear violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. We really need to sue for there being a male-only draft registration. We really need to get tough. And when the lawsuits start coming, people will start saying, well, why are you stupid guys doing that? But thousands, hundreds of thousands of men will understand. Many women will understand. And that's what, and it's the beginning of those dialogues. I mean, when I was involved with the women's movement at the beginning, you know, and women started to protest and sit in offices and so on, and the women were called bra burners, and they were called lesbians and dykes and things like that, whether or not they were. And it was like, but it took the sorting through of all those issues and for many aspects of society to get involved. And so I think that one of the things I'd like to really have happen at this Voice for Men conference, certainly I'll be aiming part of my efforts toward this at the workshop that I'm doing before the conference, is seeing our best and brightest men who are disenchanted and saying, channel your energy to creating change, to working with a Voice for Men, for working with people like Tom Golden. Here's an example of a type of therapist that you can be. You don't just have to be a patsy to the female, to a female point of view. You can be a teacher who's strong. You can be not an imitation female teacher, or if you're going to be a teacher, be a soft, warm, tender person. You can come. We need to get exchange programs so males are teachers to boys in first grade, second grade, third grade. So poor boys, economically poor boys, don't go from an inner city with only mothers to a school system with only females. Yep. And then we go, gee, I'm wondering why the boy is responding positively to a gang leader who says, I can give you rep, I can give you respect, I can give you reputation. We don't want the first positive male in a boy's life to be a gang leader.
Indeed.
Oh man, is that ever true?
Yes. One of the things that I see happening now that kind of ties into what we're talking about is that I think we have basically a drought on masculinity. In this culture, there's a drought. And what do animals do in Africa when there's a drought? The animals will go to where the water is, and I think we're seeing some of that today with our young men. Because where do the young men flock to? The places where there's still a masculine ethos. The sports is one, and gaming is another one. Mm-hmm. Both of these places, whatever effort you put into it, you get paid for that. It's like it's a one-to-one. If you try hard, if you practice, if you do this and that, you get the return back, which is very different from what they see in schools and what they see in the workplace. When other people get hired because of their skin color, or because of their genitalia, or whatever. Now these boys fly, and the other thing in gaming is they can say whatever they want. Mm-hmm. They can just blow it out, and young men love this. This is a masculine space in some ways. And I think that a part of why we're seeing this is they're being pulled to where there's a little bit of masculine left in our culture.
Yes.
We need to bustle for it. One of the things I do as a therapist is, when I'm working with parents, they're like, oh, my boy plays these video games all the time. And I say, I tell you what, get him to teach you the game. Get him to teach you his game. What this does is it puts the boy on top. He becomes the teacher. He becomes the expert. The parents have to be dumb for a while, but they learn about the game. Particularly grandparents do a great job with this. And it turns things on its head a little bit. And he starts to be the expert where he's involved in things, instead of being the one who's told what to do, go to bed, quit playing that game all the time. Anyway, so looking for creative ways we can get into male spaces and help our young men to be admired for what they do. Because when young men are admired, good things happen. And what we've done over the last 40 years is we have withheld admiration of young men. We've withheld it. They don't feel admired at all. We got to switch that around a little bit. We got to help them with this competition thing. We got to help them where they can compete openly, and win or lose. Losing's good too. The schools, so often I hear the schools talk about, oh, everyone should win. That's not the guy's way. That's not the young man's way. He wants to say, look, I did better than him. I win. Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
And and when you teach a boy that way, you also teach him how to lose gracefully.
Yes.
And that's such a contribution. Let me give a little bit of data on what you're saying there, Tom, and also talk about this whole concept of turning to a boy if he's addicted to video games, at least starting with the process of getting him to teach you the games. So here's the neuroscience behind that, and the data on video game playing. The average boy plays video games 13 hours per week. 13 hours per week. The average girl plays video games 5 hours per week. And when you move toward that 13-hour a week level, you start moving, depending on the boy, toward an addictive type of state. Now, an addictive state means that when you win at the video games that you're playing a lot, the nucleus accumbens of your brain starts engorging with blood. And when it engorges with blood, basically the response is that dopamine, or the feel-good drug, is released in your brain to make you feel good about winning at the game. The challenge is that that what doesn't happen is your ability, that the part of your brain being stimulated that helps you translate winning at things into winning in real life. So, for example, some boy can be really good at NFL Madden football as a game, but he may not even feel comfortable going out and playing football with the boys because the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for translating the game into real life experiences, that's getting blocked from blood going into it when the nucleus accumbens, the part that is being stimulated by the winning of the video games, is operating well. And so the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is all blocked, and the boy doesn't even feel good about being able to go out and do something. Now, Tom's suggestion about asking the boy to teach the parent the game means that the child is now being rewarded for doing something outside of winning at the game. He's winning as a teacher, he's winning respect, and he's winning respect from the two people he cares most about, his mom and his dad. And that's really crucial. We may say he doesn't appear to care much about his mom and dad, he appears to care only about video games. Just try having him be able to get the respect of his mom and dad and see how that makes him flourish. That's the fear behind games, and when it moves to the addiction level, is that this is the only thing that I can win at, and that's oftentimes what many boys are left with. Tom, do you concur with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. I would agree 100%. I would add one more thing. It's a little bit off topic, but sort of on the nuclear accumbens they found is also impacted by the ADHD drugs.
Oh yes, definitely.
And so that the very drugs we're giving our young men to help them concentrate and to stay focused is going to demotivate them after they stop taking it. Yeah. They go into a slump, and they're thinking that it literally shrinks the nuclear accumbens. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot, and this is controversial stuff. This is not 100% factual, blah blah blah. But read up on it, parents. See what you think. And do you want your kid to be an experiment to see if his nuclear accumbens shrinks because of this medication? I wouldn't if it was me.
You know, Tom, it is definitely controversial, but as somebody that worked in addictions for so many years, I can tell you that there's not much controversy in my mind that certain drugs are, for all practical purposes, amphetamines that we're giving young boys. There's something called CNS rebound effect, where the central nervous system is elevated and pushed into a different state by a drug, and then when you remove it, it does crash. That happens with cocaine, it happens with other drugs, and it happens with drugs like Ritalin. People, I really believe, should think very long and hard and do a lot of investigation and get a lot of second opinions before putting children on powerful psychotropic medication. That is a drastic step in a child's life, and we're just beginning to understand the far-reaching consequences of doing that, even into their adulthood. And with that, I'll leave that subject alone. But I think it's very important to consider that.
Yeah. If anybody wanted more information on this, they could check out Leonard Sax's book,
Boys Adrift.
Yeah, Boys Adrift, which is just a mind blower of a book if you read through it. It's got a lot of good information in there.
I say Leonard Sax's Boys Adrift is probably the best single book to go to, and then also Michael Gurian has a great deal in his book Boys and Girls Learn Differently on the neuroscience differences between boys and girls, yeah. and his is very good about applications to the school system. So those two books will really, I think, help you if you have a son or a daughter that is beginning to move toward addictive mode. When I say addictive mode, when you say to your son and daughter it's time to come to dinner, and they say, no, I can't because it's, I have to do the game. The moment you do that, you know that something, the moment that's the response, you know that something's wrong in your family. And one of the things that's wrong is that the boy's priority or the girl's priority of the video game over dinner or over anything that you ask for, if that becomes the reigning priority, then you aren't in charge. They're in charge. And when they're in charge, there's a lack of boundary enforcement. When there's a lack of boundary enforcement, then children are not able to learn postponed gratification. They're not able to learn how to do something they don't want to do, like have dinner with you, in order to get to something that they want to do, back to the video game. When the video game can take priority because the children tell you that they are not ready to come to dinner yet, then you know that there's something that you can be doing differently as a parent to allow a greater amount of responsiveness, so the video game addiction doesn't have a chance to take hold at a deeper level.
Indeed. Did we want to talk a little bit about the conference coming up?
Sure, absolutely.
I would like to hear in particular from Warren to let everybody know that there are still tickets available. Ticket sales are going well. You can get them at avoicefrommen.com. But this is actually a 3-day event. There is the 26th, 27th, and 28th of June. The 27th and 28th is the conference proper. On the 26th is a pre-conference day with a special workshop by Dr. Farrell and a press conference for local media. But I would like to hear more details, since we're advertising it later than we have the conference, about Dr. Farrell's workshop, and because in reading what he had to say about it, I think it's a very important thing to be seated at. I know that I'm going to be there.
Certainly. I'm going to be doing 3 things basically in the pre-conference workshop. One is looking at the boy crisis and what has happened. So right now we've covered a few areas. I'll be looking at the evidence for this in mental health, how it leads, the suicide evidence. I'll be looking at the evidence in physical health and how boys are deteriorating. I'll be looking at how boys' IQs are dropping. And then I'll be looking at the causes and the solutions for that. I mentioned very briefly the cause of the purpose void and the cause of ADHD and the cause of video games, but there's also the cause of fatherlessness, and fatherlessness impacts both girls and boys, but we'll explore why it impacts boys even more than girls in terms of the vision of their future as potential fathers. We'll be looking at the economy and the transition that is being made in all industrialized nations from muscle, where the non-academic boy could get invested by using his muscle if he wasn't academic, but the economy has made a transition from muscle to mental, or from muscle to microchip, and how the jobs that boys have typically taken have been left out. We'll be looking at the perfect storm of sex, women, and pornography. There is something very powerful going on with female and male sexuality that no book that I have ever read has touched. I'll be introducing that at the conference, in the pre-conference workshop. But then I'll be also looking at the workshop sort of the issue of fatherlessness as a sense of purpose, and the enormous value. When I did the research for Father and Child Reunion, I was shocked at the 30+ different areas in which children do so much better when they have a significant amount of father involvement. I'll be talking about how to help that father involvement occur, how to educate women who you love in your life to create that father involvement to a much greater degree, both to relieve the woman of responsibilities, but also to help the children and to give the men a sense of purpose as a father. And then I'll be looking at organizing the men in the workshop in conjunction with Paul's efforts to inspire them to get involved in different areas where their talents lie, to make a difference in this area of boys and men's issues. This, when I was in 1964-65, when I was attending UCLA, I said at some thing that I spoke at, I said, the next big stage of human development in male-female will be women becoming liberated. And people just didn't even know what that meant at that time. And now I am saying the next big stage is going to be boys and men evolving in a way that will help boys and men catch up to women. We're almost a half-century behind boys and women psychologically. This will not be a fast movement. This will be a much slower movement because it's more revolutionary and more functional. As Paul said, it's always been part of our genes, our biology. When a woman asks for help, we all go out, and men compete with each other to have the Equal Pay Act. Was in 1963, 6 years before the women's movement. The moment male legislators saw that women weren't being paid equally, didn't have equal opportunities, they passed an Equal Pay Act. It's complex as to why it appears that there is not equal pay now, but if you listen to another one of our MANstream media productions, you'll see why that is not the case. But the important thing is getting our male energy and the female, cooperative female energy channeled to creating social change. And some people will say, and making sure that that is compatible. That is, many people say, well, this is more important to do than that. When Paul and I first met, he said, Warren, I'm a lot more sort of, blunt than you are. And I said, Paul, we need every personality. We need the blunt person to go zip right through when Warren Farrell is talking about nucleus accumbens. And we need all of our personalities to be on board, to work in the legal way, to work in the social way, to work in the diplomatic way, to work in the therapeutic way, to work in the system and outside the system, to put pressure from every different level. So that's what part of my workshop will pay attention to.
I think it's really important to reiterate a couple of points about that. One is that what I'm hearing Warren say, and I think it's the best possible move that we can make, is we're looking to make connection and to seek out people that are interested in being involved and in developing leadership. We must have that in order to continue to go on. And he was also made a point earlier that I wanted to come back and revisit briefly. I totally agree. We need to sue the dickens out of people, left and right. We need tons of lawsuits. Many of them will fail. Many of them will be laughed out of court. Eventually they will start to stick. Why? Because these are clear violations of law. When you have star chambers operating in colleges without due process of law, and they are so blatantly discriminatory, the young men are starting to sue now. The ones that have been falsely accused and have been kicked out of college are filing lawsuits, and we need more and more of them. We need to sue the colleges and universities for their discriminatory practices against men. And it's very blatant and out there. It just takes enough lawsuits to eventually make them stick, and they will have to start following the rule of law in most countries. But we need people to get involved in doing this, and that's already happening. I mean, this is a pretty incredible lineup of speakers. There's a lot of people coming. I can't reveal names of people that have purchased tickets, but I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of people that if you follow this movement, in that audience from across the U.S. and Canada and Great Britain. We're very excited about what's happening. We need you to come participate, particularly, in everything. But I also want you to take a look at Dr. Farrell's workshop. If you go to avoiceformen.com, there's a banner at the top of the website that's there permanently and constantly. You can click on that and get all the details of both the conference proper and Dr. Farrell's workshop. You can get tickets for both events there. It'll describe things. You can get your hotel reservations if you're coming in from out of town. Everything is set up for you to come. We need people to say, let's do it. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work, because the time is now for this.
And we're going to have a really good time.
Yes, we are.
Right.
So come because of that. It'll be a masculine environment indeed.
And I'm celebrating my birthday at that workshop.
There you go.
That is outstanding.
Bring presents. Okay, are we finished for tonight?
We are.
Does somebody want to sum up what we've done?
I'll defer to Warren.
Tom, I've often done that. Why don't you go ahead, Tom?
All right. Tonight we've talked about many different aspects of failure to launch. We've talked about the competition in schools, the drought in masculinity. We've talked about fatherhood and its importance. We've talked about how men and boys are not really loved and respected in our culture, and on lots of other things, including the whole family court stuff. And there's so many issues we really haven't touched on that I feel kind of bad that we've only scratched the surface, really, of the failure to launch stuff, but I think we got a good start. I think we got a good start, and I think that the important thing that both Paul and Warren talked about was that there is a kernel of goodness in this failure to launch. That maybe the boys who are not finding a way to go is one of the best things that could happen, and that it's going to help us steer into a new direction to see things a little bit differently. So maybe that's a good place to stop.
Yes, what I call the unconscious wisdom of some young men.
Yes, the unconscious wisdom of some young men, many young men, because we all know men are good.